Don't be mad. Mom, my son said, his smile tight. He told me the papers were just for taxes, just to make things easier. I had worked my whole life for this house, 63 years building a life here. I signed where he pointed. Weeks later, I learned I had signed away everything, my home, my retirement, my entire future, handed over to him and his wife. My name is Margaret Doyle, but everyone who matters just calls me Maggie. I am 63 years old, a retired ICU nurse, and I live alone in the small, one-story brick house my late husband Patrick and I paid off a decade ago. It sits in a quiet suburb of Phoenix, where the heat is a constant, familiar weight. My life is not exciting, but it is orderly. I like it that way. After 40 years of life and death decisions under fluorescent lights, I prefer the slow, predictable rhythm of the desert. My mornings are for my cacti, checking their soil, admiring the stubborn, prickly life of the saguaros and the barrels lining my walkway. I work part-time, just 2 shifts a week, at a free clinic downtown. It keeps my mind sharp and my hands busy. The weekends are for my grandson, Ethan. We FaceTime every Sunday, and he shows me his video games, and I tell him stories about his grandfather. That rhythm broke on a Tuesday. My son, Lucas, called to say he and his wife, Brittany, were stopping by for dinner. Lucas is 35, my only child, a mid-level manager at some tech firm called Skyline Dynamics. Brittany, his wife, is what they call an influencer. She has a blog about family financial optimization, which always sounded to me like a fancy way of saying she likes spending money. They arrived with cheap wine and expensive smiles, over the chicken I'd roasted. Lucas started in. He didn't ask about the clinic or my garden. He talked about inflation. He talked about medical risks, the instability of Medicare policies, the dangers of being house rich and cash poor. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the one he used when he was convincing himself of something. "Mum," he said, leaning across my kitchen table, "we need to protect your assets, for the future." He slid a thick stack of papers toward me. "It's just a trust. We move the house into a trust. It simplifies taxes, and it means if you ever need long-term care, the state can't touch the house. It's just paperwork." A small, cold knot tightened in my stomach. "A trust, Lucas. Your father and I set everything up years ago." "This is different. Mom, this is smarter." Brittany chimed in, patting my hand. "It's what all modern families do." Lucas saw my hesitation. "Nothing changes," he promised, his eyes holding mine. "You still live here. This is still your house. No one can ever touch it. This just protects it." I looked at my son, the boy I'd put through college working double shifts. I saw the earnest set of his jaw, the manufactured worry in his brow. I trusted him. So I signed where he told me to, my reading glasses left on the counter, my focus blurred by his assurances. A few weeks passed. The cacti bloomed. I worked my shifts. Then the letter came. It wasn't from my local bank branch. It was from a corporate legal department. It welcomed me to the Doyle Family Living Trust and detailed the recent updates to account holders and access permissions. My name was listed, but not in the way I expected. I called Lucas. He came over that evening, alone this time. He looked tense, his jaw tight in a way that had nothing to do with earnestness. He didn't sit down for coffee. He placed another, thinner stack of papers on the table. "Mum, this is just the final confirmation," he said, avoiding my eyes. I read the first page. It wasn't confirmation. It was a declaration. It stated that the property, my home, along with a significant portion of my retirement account, had been legally transferred. Not to a trust where I was in charge, but into the marital assets of Lucas and Brittany Doyle. "Don't be mad, Mom," he said quickly, the words tumbling out. "This is to protect you. It's all part of the plan." "What plan?" "Lucas." My voice was quiet. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt too thin. "For Ethan's future," he said, gaining momentum, pivoting. "We're looking at a bigger house, a better school district, in Scottsdale. This equity." He gestured around my kitchen. "This is the key. It helps us secure the loan." I stopped listening. My head was buzzing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out his voice. I looked past him. I saw the doorway Patrick had carried me through. I saw the scuff marks on the floor from Ethan's tricycle. I saw my husband's faded green armchair, the one I still couldn't bring myself to give away, sitting empty in the living room. And on the table, between us, was a piece of paper that reduced all those years, all that life, to a number he could leverage. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked down at the documents, at the cold, official ink, and the space where my signature had been. Then I looked at the name listed as the primary trustee, his name, and I knew, with the chilling certainty of an ICU nurse reading a flatline, that this was not a misunderstanding. It was not protection. It was a clean, calculated theft. Sleep did not come. I paced the hallway, a ghost in my own home, moving from the dark kitchen to the moonlit bedroom and back again. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. With every step on the tile, I saw myself in my white nursing scrubs, coming home at 3 a.m, my feet aching but my wallet a little heavier. I remembered calculating tuition payments for Lucas, skipping meals to cover his textbooks, telling myself every double shift was an investment in his future. I had poured my life into that boy, into his education, believing I was building him a ladder. I never imagined he would use it to climb over me. I thought of Patrick. He was a simple man, an air-conditioning repairman who understood the brutal Phoenix heat. He understood hard work. He'd stand on this very porch, looking at the house, and say, "Mags, this brick and mortar, this is your fortress. When I'm gone, this place will take care of you." He meant it. This house wasn't just an asset to him. It was my security, my dignity. My hands trembled as I knelt before the old safe hidden in the back of our closet, behind my winter coats. The combination clicked. The heavy door swung open. Inside, beneath Patrick's honourable discharge papers, was our file, the original mortgage, stamped paid in full in heavy red ink. Our wills, simple and clear. Everything left to each other, and then to Lucas upon my death. Not before. Our insurance policies. I touched the crisp paper, each document a testament to a life built on mutual protection. Patrick had arranged every single line to ensure I was the one who was safe, the one who held the keys. I understood it then, sitting on the closet floor. The trust Lucas had me sign wasn't an umbrella. It was a net. It had bypassed, invalidated, and completely subverted Patrick's every wish. It had taken his fortress and handed the keys to the enemy. My mind splintered. One moment, I'd see the face of my 6-year-old son crying after he fell off his bike. The next, I'd hear Brittany's voice at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, swirling her wine glass. It's a cute little house, Maggie, she'd said, her smile not reaching her eyes. But so far from everything. All this wasted equity in the middle of the desert. I had dismissed it as youthful arrogance then. Now, it sounded like a business proposal. The next morning, my voice shook so hard I barely recognized it. I called the bank's trust department. I clutched the receiver, reading from the letter. I need someone to explain the structure of the Doyle Family Living Trust. A polite, distant voice on the other end clicked a keyboard. Yes, Mrs. Doyle. I have it here. A standard living trust. It looks like your son, Lucas Doyle, is the sole trustee and primary administrator. And what are my rights? I asked. A pause. As the grantor, you hold residency rights as stipulated by the trustee, but all financial decisions, transfers, or liquidations are at the sole discretion of Mr. Lucas Doyle. I felt the blood drain from my face. But I thought I was just protecting it. The signatures are all valid, ma'am, the voice said, patient, as if speaking to a child. Everything was filed electronically and appears to be in perfect legal order. I hung up. A stranger. I was a stranger in my own finances, a guest in my own home, and the law said it was all perfectly legal. I called Lucas immediately. No answer. I called again. He picked up on the fifth ring, his voice short, annoyed. Mum, I'm in a meeting. What did you do? Lucas. The bank said you're the sole trustee. They said I have no rights. A heavy sigh. Mum, we went over this. It's in the trust now. It's done. It can't be undone. It's for the best. Then, his voice softened into that terrible, placating tone. Look, we'll take care of everything. When you get older, more frail, we'll make sure to arrange a good place for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. A good place. The words hung in the air long after I'd dropped the phone. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, sour bile rising in my throat. I wasn't his mother. I was a piece of furniture he was already planning to place. A problem to be managed, an inconvenience to be arranged when I became too much trouble. I was no longer a person with a voice. That night, I didn't pace. I sat on the front porch, in the chair Patrick built. The hot, dry desert wind blew across my face, carrying the scent of dust and creosote. It didn't feel like a comfort. It felt like grit. I looked at the street, at the other dark houses, and the grief finally hardened. This was not a family disagreement. This was not a mistake. This was a war for my life, for my right to exist as more than just a line item on their balance sheet. And I, Margaret Doyle, was not a piece of furniture. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was Brittany, standing alone on my porch, holding a pink box of donuts, as if it were a peace offering. Lucas was nowhere to be seen. Hi, Maggie, she chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she waltzed into my kitchen. I wanted to stop by, just us girls. Lucas is so stressed. We were looking at some amazing retirement communities for you last night. One has a resort-style pool, and a full gym, and even movie nights. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, my hand surprisingly steady. I let her talk. I let her paint a picture of this sanitized pasture they planned to put me out to. I listened, and I noted the details. I noted the way she said, "We've already finalized the down payment with the realtor, and we're just facing a really tight deadline with the bank." The way she said we felt sharp. This wasn't just Lucas. This was a duet. Lucas was just so worried about you being alone here, she continued, pulling a jelly-filled donut from the box. And our financial lawyer said this was really the only way. He wouldn't even consider approving the loan for our new house until all your assets were transferred into our names. It's just a formality for the bank. You know, it makes the portfolio look stronger. There it was. The mask didn't just slip, she threw it on the floor. She wasn't a passive wife, dragged along by my son's ambition. She was the co-pilot. My house. My retirement. It wasn't protection for me. It was the collateral for them. I forced myself to look confused, vulnerable. A financial lawyer. That sounds complicated. Who is it? Oh, they're the best, she bragged, mistaking my quiet for impressed agreement. Silverline Wealth Planning. They handle everything for high-net-worth families. I burned the name into my mind. Silverline Wealth Planning. As soon as her luxury SUV pulled away from the curb, I didn't clean the kitchen. I went straight to the garage. The air was thick and hot, smelling of old tires and dust. I opened the trunk of my old sedan, the one I kept for emergencies, and dug under the spare tire. There was an old, battered recipe box. Inside, beneath expired coupons and Patrick's dog tags, was a stack of old business cards. I shuffled past mechanics and dentists until I found the one I wanted, Anya Rodriguez. We had worked the same brutal night shifts in the ICU for 15 years. She'd burned out and left nursing to become a paralegal. I dialed the number on the card, my stomach twisting with the shame of calling after so many years, and only because I needed something. She answered on the second ring, her voice still the same. No nonsense. Anya? It's Maggie. Maggie Doyle. Maggie. My God, girl, how are you? It's been... The forced pleasantries died in my throat. The desperation I'd been holding back flooded up. My voice cracked. Anya, I'm in trouble. I need help. I think my son just stole my life. There was a dead silence on the line. The shock was total. Then, the ICU nurse I knew, the woman who could handle a code blue without blinking, snapped into place. Her voice became crisp, cold, and professional. Okay, Maggie. Don't say anything else on the phone. My boss, Mr. Hale, he specializes in this. This is what we do. Rodriguez and Hale Elder Law Group. Can you be in downtown Phoenix tomorrow at 10 a.m. and Maggie, bring every piece of paper you have? We hung up. I had until tomorrow. I went to my desk, my fingers stiff on the keyboard. I logged into my bank, my hands shaking. The trust was there, just as I feared. My access limited to view only. But then I clicked on my credit card accounts. I had a secondary card, one I kept for true emergencies, with a $10,000 limit. It was maxed out. I stared at the screen, my breath catching. The charges were recent. A resort in Sedona. A $3,000 charge from Modern Lifestyles Furniture. New smart home devices from a tech store. A high-end grill. Things I had never seen. Places I had never been. They weren't just taking my house. They were draining me dry while I was still in it. They were using my good credit, the credit I had spent 40 years meticulously building, as their personal slush fund to furnish their new life, while they planned to ship me off to an old one. The sadness that had paralyzed me for 2 days evaporated. It was replaced by something else, something cold, heavy, and familiar. I went to my printer. I began printing the credit card statements, one by one. I printed the emails from the bank. I stacked them on my kitchen table, making neat, organized piles. It was the same methodical calm I used to feel when a patient was coding. You don't panic. You don't cry. You assess the damage. You prioritize the interventions. And you act. I looked at the stacks of paper, my evidence. In the reflection of the dark computer screen, my eyes were not the eyes of a grieving widow. They were the eyes of a woman who had watched too many people die and had decided, quite clearly, that she would not be one of them. The offices of Rodriguez and Hale Elder Law Group were not imposing. They were in a modest building downtown, but inside, everything was quiet, orderly, and serious. Anya met me at the door and gave me a hug that nearly cracked a rib, whispering, "We'll fix this," before leading me back to a conference room. Thomas Hale stood up when I entered. He was a man approaching 60, I guessed, tall and broad-shouldered, with a stillness about him. He was black, wore a simple suit, and had the most patient eyes I'd ever seen. This was a man who handled the wreckage of families for a living. I laid out my papers, the trust, the bank letters, the credit card statements I had printed, now highlighted in yellow. He spent a long time, maybe 10 minutes, reading in complete silence. Anya brought me coffee that I didn't touch. Finally, he looked up at me over his glasses. Well, Maggie, on its face. This trust is legally structured to remove you from control. They hired a competent, if predatory, firm. My heart sank. But, he continued, holding up a hand, it is riddled with procedural irregularities, the timing of the signing, the fact that you clearly were not provided with independent legal counsel, the lack of any recorded consultation explaining what rights you were forfeiting. It stinks. He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. In Arizona, we have strong protections against what we call undue influence and elder financial abuse. A signature is meaningless if it was obtained through deception by a person in a position of trust. A son, he tapped the trust document, is the very definition of a fiduciary relationship. We have a case. We can, at the very least, petition to freeze all these assets. He promised me, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He sat at my kitchen table and promised I would live in that house until I died. He said no one could touch it. Thomas nodded slowly. That is our cornerstone. I need you to write down every single time he made a promise like that. The date, the time, and crucially, who else was present. Anya, who had been listening from the doorway, suddenly spoke up. Maggie, what about Easter? Last year Ethan was there. Lucas made that toast. Remember? He held up his glass and said, "To Mom, and to the house that will always be Grandma's house." The memory hit me like a physical blow. She was right. Ethan, my grandson, he was there. He'd heard it. Meeting Ethan was the most painful thing I've ever had to do. I couldn't go to their house. Not now. I picked him up from school the next day, saying I wanted to treat him to a burger. We sat in a loud, bright, fast food restaurant. He's 13, all knees and elbows, but with kind eyes. Ethan, I started, my hands shaking around my soda cup. Do you remember Easter lunch last year at my house? Do you remember the toast your dad made? He frowned, concentrating. Yeah, he said slowly. He said something about the house always being yours. Then he looked down at his fries, his expression darkening. Mom got mad in the car. She told Dad he was too weak with you and that he needed to stick to the plan. The cruelty of it, the cold calculation, made me nauseous. I reached across the table, covering his hand. I didn't tell him the details. I wouldn't put that burden on him. Honey, if someone, like a grown-up in a courtroom, asked you if you heard your dad say that, would you be willing to tell the truth? He looked scared, torn, but he met my eyes. He said it. It's the truth. Yes. Grandma. I reported back to Thomas. He was grimly satisfied. A witness, even a young one, who overheard the deception and the conflict, is powerful. Now, Maggie, comes the hardest part. You have to go home and play the part of the victim. Be confused. Be cooperative. Don't accuse them of anything. What, Thomas? They are stealing from me. I know. But we need more. We need them to expose their motives, especially their connection to this Silverline wealth planning. Let them text you. Let them email you. We need a record of their pressure. So I began. I became a spy in my own life. I saved every text from Brittany with links to lovely senior living apartments. I screenshotted every email from Lucas that said, "Mom, just sign this medical release. It's easier if I handle the appointments." I recorded every voicemail. At our next meeting, Thomas reviewed the new evidence and proposed a truly terrifying move. "They're getting impatient," he said. "They're going to try to move you. They'll try to prove you're incompetent. I want you to let them start the process," he said, his voice firm. "Let them schedule the tours. Let them make the calls. The more aggressively they try to force you out of that house, the more they try to label you as confused or frail, the stronger our case for abuse becomes. Let them walk right into our trap." They called it a family meeting, which, in my experience, meant an ambush. They sat at my kitchen table, the one Patrick had sanded and refinished himself, and fanned out a dozen glossy brochures. The covers all showed smiling, silver-haired couples playing golf or painting watercolors. Senior living, written in cheerful, looping script. Lucas began, his voice heavy with that manufactured concern he'd perfected. "Mum, we've been worried sick. This neighborhood. It's just not as safe as it used to be. I read about a break-in just 2 streets over." Brittany jumped in, her tone dripping with pity. "And your memory? Maggie? We're worried about you being alone. What if you fall? What if you forget to take your medication? It's just too much for you to handle." I clutched my coffee cup, feeling the warmth against my cold hands. I looked at the pictures of sterile dining rooms and communal activity centers. "Play the part," Thomas had said. "Let them dig." I forced my shoulders to slump, to look defeated. "Oh," I whispered, letting my voice waver. You've really been looking into this? So, what exactly are you planning?" Lucas and Brittany exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. They thought I was surrendering. Lucas leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, the relaxed executive who had closed the deal. "Well," he said, "to be honest, Mum, we've already started the process. We had to file a preliminary petition with the county court." My blood didn't just run cold. It froze. A petition for what? Lucas. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's just for guardianship. A formality, really. It's based on..." He glanced at his papers. "Some signs of cognitive decline." Cognitive decline. Brittany, ever the pragmatist, spelled it out. It just makes it easier for Lucas to manage everything for you. Maggie, your appointments, your pills, your finances. Once the court agrees, Lucas will have the authority to make the best decisions for your health and safety. It meant I would be legally dead, a ward of my own son. I would lose the right to sign a check, to refuse a medical treatment, to decide where I slept. And in that instant, the last month snapped into sharp, brutal focus. The time Lucas had helped organize my pillbox, and I'd spent 2 days feeling dizzy, only to find he'd switched my morning and evening medication. The afternoon he insisted my cardiologist appointment was on a Wednesday, when I knew it was Tuesday, causing me to miss it. He hadn't been careless. He had been creating a paper trail. He was manufacturing my incompetence. The meeting ended soon after. They were ecstatic, believing I was a confused old woman ready to be put away. They left in a cloud of self-congratulation, Brittany reminding Lucas they had a dinner reservation. In their haste, Lucas left his leather-bound folder on the table. As I picked it up to bring it to him, a stapled set of pages slipped out. Petition for appointment of guardian, Maricopa County Superior Court. I didn't call. I drove straight to Thomas Hale's office. I slid the glossy brochures and the court petition across his desk. He read the petition first, his calm demeanor hardening into something I recognized from my ICU days, a focused, clinical anger. "This is the end game," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "They didn't just want your assets, Maggie. They want to control you. They want to silence you and liquidate everything." He tapped the petition. "They're trying to have you declared legally incapacitated so that even if you fight the trust, your testimony is worthless." He picked up his phone. "We move now. I'm scheduling you for a full neuropsychological evaluation. This afternoon. With a doctor I trust. We need an independent baseline before they can serve you with these papers." The next few hours were a blur. I sat in a cold medical office while a kind, professional woman asked me to remember lists of words, draw a clock, identify patterns, and explain complex proverbs. It was exhausting, insulting, and terrifying. 2 days later, Thomas called me. "I have the report," he said, and for the first time, I heard a genuine smile in his voice. "Maggie, you are not just competent. The doctor's official assessment is that your cognitive function is superior, sharper than most people half your age." He paused, letting that sink in. "The doctor is appalled by this petition. She is prepared to testify as an expert witness." That night, I stood in my bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink. I stared at my reflection. I saw the lines around my eyes, the slight sag in my jaw, the silver strands in my hair. For months, Lucas and Brittany had looked at this face and seen only weakness. They saw an old woman, confused, frail, an obstacle to be managed. But I looked closer. I saw the nurse who had run a trauma ward for 20 years. I saw the woman who had buried a husband and paid off a mortgage. I saw the mother who had just had her heart ripped out and was still standing. They had mistaken age for infirmity. They had mistaken grief for senility. I looked into my own eyes. They were not the eyes of a victim. It was a war face. Lucas must have received the official notice from the court. The hearing for the guardianship petition was set for just a few weeks away. The pressure, which had been a steady squeeze, suddenly became a vice. My phone began buzzing relentlessly. Texts from Brittany, dozens of them, with links to beautiful senior living facilities. They had names like Desert Bloom and Canyon Sunset Villa. They were, of course, the cheapest, most poorly reviewed places in the county, dressed up with stock photos of happy seniors who were nowhere to be found on the actual premises. Lucas's calls were short and stripped of their fake concern. Now, it was just irritation. "Mum, we are running out of time. We need to show the judge you're in a safe environment. You have to pick one." I waited until I knew he was at his breaking point. Then I called him, pitching my voice low, making it crack just slightly, as if I were exhausted and defeated. "Lucas," I whispered. "I've been thinking. I'm tired of fighting. It's too much." I heard him take a sharp breath, sensing victory. "Maybe you're right," I continued. "I'm willing to try one of those places, just for a little while. A trial stay. If you'll let me choose from the list you sent." The relief in his voice was so thick it was obscene. "Mom, yes, of course, that's wonderful. So much smarter." He and Brittany were ecstatic. They thought they had won. They thought I was a broken-down old woman, finally accepting her fate. They immediately selected the one they'd been pushing for all along Sunrise Palms assisted living. It was a sterile block building on the far edge of the city, right next to the freeway. I knew why they'd chosen it. The website had a bright banner advertising a fast-track move-in bonus if the contract was signed within 48 hours. My next call was to Thomas Hale. "I'm going in," I said. There was a pause. He understood exactly what I was doing. "Maggie, this is a brilliant move, but it's dangerous. You won't be a resident. You'll be an undercover operative in hostile territory. Document everything. Your own autonomy. How you manage your medication, your meals, your schedule, and, just as importantly, document their actions, their visits, or lack thereof, what they say to the staff. This isn't a surrender, Maggie. It's reconnaissance." I packed a single small suitcase, tucked in the zippered lining, hidden beneath my support hose. I placed a slim, pocket-sized notebook and 2 good pens. Sunrise Palms smelled of ammonia and regret. Lucas and Brittany dropped me off, signed the intake forms with a brisk, executive efficiency, and were gone before the dinner service of grey-looking meatloaf began. My room was small, with a thin mattress and a window that overlooked a gravel parking lot. That night, under a single dim lamp, I made my first entry. Day 1. Arrived 2:15 p.m. Lucas and Brittany departed 2:35 p.m. No tour, no goodbye. I became a meticulous observer. I recorded every day. Day 3. No visit, no call. Day 4. Brittany stopped by for 10 minutes, took a picture of me by the window, probably for her blog. Complained to the nurse at the desk that I was prone to wandering, a complete lie. I managed my own medication, laying the pills out in front of the head nurse every morning to prove I was doing it. I joined the walking club. I ate the terrible food without complaint. And I listened. I found an ally in Teresa, a sharp-witted Mexican woman in a wheelchair, parked by the front entrance like a sentry. Her own daughter had pulled a similar guardianship trick. "They paint you as crazy," she warned me over a game of checkers. "They tell the staff you are difficult, that you are confused. So when you finally fight back, you just look like the crazy old woman they described. Be smart. Be quiet. Watch." She was right. A young, overworked aide, who looked like she actually cared, pulled me aside while changing my sheets. "Mrs. Doyle," she whispered. "I shouldn't say this. But your son gave explicit orders to the business office. All your medical reports, all your bills, they are to be sent only to him. They were told not to give you copies, even if you ask. It ain't right. You're clearer than my own mother. I thanked her, my heart pounding. It was the proof of control Thomas needed. That evening, Lucas made one of his brief, obligatory visits. He was stressed, pacing my small room, talking loudly to Brittany on his phone about their mortgage application. Something about a delay in underwriting. He left his iPad on my nightstand when he stalked into the hallway for better reception. I didn't hesitate. I'd spent 20 years using charting tablets in the ICU. His device wasn't even locked. I opened his email. It took me 30 seconds. I searched for the name Brittany had given me, Silverline Wealth Planning. There it was. An email thread from 2 weeks ago. From Lucas to his wealth manager. My eyes scanned the text, my blood turning to ice. Proceed with leveraging the full equity from the primary residence. Once we move her into managed care and the guardianship is finalized, we can liquidate the asset and transfer the funds to the new marital pool. He was selling my house, my home. He called it the asset. My hands were shaking, but not with fear, with rage. I grabbed my own cheap smartphone. I took 3 clear, steady photographs of the iPad's screen, capturing his words, the dates, the recipient's name. I closed the email, locked the iPad, and set it back on the nightstand, face down, exactly as he'd left it. He came back in, grabbed it without a word, and left. That night, in the dark. I wrote in my notebook, Day 9, target acquired. I emailed the photos to Thomas Hale with a summary of my findings, the staff warnings, the sparse visits, the lies. This place, this beige box of despair, was not my prison. It was my war room. I was still at Sunrise Palms when Thomas called. His voice was different, harder. Maggie, the emails you sent are the key. He didn't just transfer the property, he's using it. This Silverline firm helped him structure a way to borrow against your home's equity, essentially laundering it. It's bank fraud. I sat stiffly on the thin mattress. What does that mean for us? It means we're moving beyond a civil complaint, he said. I'm bringing in a specialist, a forensic accountant named Kayla Monroe. She's a bulldog. She's going to follow the money, see exactly where every penny he's borrowed against your home has gone. Kayla Monroe worked fast. She worked from the shadows. Within a week, she had uncovered a cesspool. She found that Lucas, using the power from the trust, had taken out a massive line of credit against my home. He was funneling the money into high-risk tech stocks, day trading, trying to get rich before the housing market turned. Worse. Kayla found loan applications where Lucas had listed me as a co-trustee, a blatant lie. He had forged my electronic signature on at least 3 documents to increase his credit limit. He wasn't just stealing my past. He was mortgaging my name to finance his fantasy life. While the investigation simmered beneath the surface, Brittany began to unravel. Her influencer life started to crack. She must have felt the financial squeeze as the bank accounts froze. Her social media posts, usually full of smug advice on optimization, became frantic. She posted veiled stories about financial stress and unforeseen challenges. Then, she made a mistake. My grandson, Ethan, who had been watching his mother's public feed with a growing sense of dread, sent me a screenshot. Brittany had posted a tearful video monologue about feeling overwhelmed. In the background, visible on her laptop screen for just 2 seconds, was an email from their bank. The subject line was stark: urgent inquiry regarding potential fraud investigation. Ethan had captioned it, "Grandma, I don't know what this means, but it looks bad." Mum deleted it fast. The dominoes began to fall. Kayla Monroe, armed with her findings, sent an anonymous, detailed report to the Internal Compliance Department at Skyline Dynamics. Lucas, it turned out, had been foolish enough to use his company email and even reference his corporate title in some of his dealings with Silverline. 2 days later, I got a text from Ethan. "Dad just came home. He's screaming. He said they suspended him." The true break came that evening. My phone rang. It was Lucas's number, but it was a pocket dial. I heard fumbling. Then Brittany's voice, sharp and shrill. "This is all your fault," she was screaming. "Your fault. We were fine, but you had to have it all, didn't you? You couldn't just wait. You had to get greedy for that old woman's money, and now you've ruined us." "Shut up, Brittany," Lucas roared back. "You were the one pushing for the Scottsdale house. You were the one complaining about her clutter. I didn't tell you to commit fraud, you idiot." I sat there in the quiet, beige room of the assisted living facility, listening to my son and daughter-in-law tear each other apart. I realized then that their partnership was never based on love or even loyalty. It was a business merger built entirely on greed. And as any good nurse knows, a system under that much stress, with no real foundation, cannot hold. It will crash. I hung up and called Thomas. "They're turning on each other," I said. "It's time," he replied. "I'm filing the report. Tomorrow morning, the District Attorney's Office and the state's Adult Protective Services Division will be officially opening a case against Lucas and Brittany Doyle for felony elder financial abuse." The next day, Lucas received an official, registered email. I know he did, because he forwarded it to me by accident, in his panic, before recalling it seconds later. But I saw the subject line notice of formal investigation, DA case file 74E. He must have been staring at that same screen, the blood draining from his face, realizing this was no longer a simple family dispute. This was not something he could manage or spin. The game he had started, the one he thought he was controlling, was now a runaway train. I took my small notebook from its hiding place. I walked out into the dusty courtyard of Sunrise Palms, past Teresa, who gave me a sharp, knowing nod. I sat on a metal bench in the weak afternoon sun and made a new entry. Day 21. The D.A. is in. He's panicking. I closed the book and looked up at the pale blue sky. "You dug this hole yourself, son," I whispered to the empty air. The guardianship hearing loomed, a black square on the calendar. Lucas, now desperate, wanted to keep everything within the family. He still thought this was a private matter he could control. But he was wrong. News of the district attorney's investigation had leaked, seeping out of the courthouse and into the real world. It had found its way back to my quiet street, back to the neighbors who had watched me mow my own lawn for 20 years. My phone, quiet for weeks at Sunrise Palms, began to ring. It wasn't Lucas. It was Denise, the widow from 2 doors down. "Maggie, is it true what that boy of yours is trying to do, Sam and I?" She meant Sam, the retired cop across the street. "We'll be at that courthouse. We'll tell them. We'll tell them you're sharper than any of us." Then Anya called. "Maggie," she said. her paralegal voice firmly in place. Your neighbors are a good start, but you need to speak for yourself. People see you in this home, and they assume the worst. They assume Lucas is right. What am I supposed to do? Anya, take out an ad in the paper. No, she said. You're going to record a video, on your phone, right now. I balked. It felt like something Brittany would do, but Anya was ruthless. Just tell the truth. Maggie. Tell them who you are. Tell them you are competent. Tell them you were tricked. We'll just share it with the church email list and the neighborhood watch group. Let your community hear your voice. So I did. I sat on my bed, the thin blanket behind me, and I looked into the tiny black lens. I said my name. I said I was a retired ICU nurse of 40 years. I said I was in full command of my health and my finances. I said I was tricked into signing papers by my son, papers that I was told were for my protection, but were in fact designed to steal my home and my savings. I said I had been placed in this facility against my will. And I said I intended to fight. I sent the 2-minute video to Anya. It didn't just go to the church group. It spread. It was shared by Denise, then by her daughter in Tucson, then by other parents, other mothers, other older women who saw their own fears reflected in my face. It became a small, powerful tidal wave of shared stories, a chorus of "me too" from people who had felt erased by their own families. The backlash was immediate. A text message from Brittany lit up my screen. What do you think you're doing? You are embarrassing this entire family. I looked at the message, feeling nothing but a cold stillness. I typed back one single sentence. The truth is only embarrassing to those who fear it. The next visitor I had was Ethan. He looked pale, his eyes red. He'd seen the video. His friends at school had seen it. He sat on the vinyl visitor's chair in my room, his hands clenched between his knees. Grandma, he whispered, and his voice broke. Everyone's asking me about it. Mom is screaming all the time. Dad won't come out of his office. He finally looked at me, tears streaming down his face. I don't know who to believe. This was the true casualty. This boy, caught in the shrapnel of his parents' greed. I didn't try to sway him. I just held his hand. Ethan, you don't have to believe me or them. You just have to tell the truth about what you know, what you heard. That's all. He nodded, wiping his face on his sleeve. I'll do it, he said, his voice small but firm. I'll tell them what Dad said at Easter. I'll tell them what Mom said in the car. I promise. 2 days before the hearing, Lucas showed up. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved, and the confident swagger he'd worn his whole life was gone, replaced by a desperate, hunted look. He didn't bring brochures. He brought a settlement offer. Mom, he said, his voice low, trying to charm me one last time. This has all gone too far. The lawyers, it's a misunderstanding. Let's stop this. Just drop the lawsuit. Sign a waiver. We'll set up an allowance for you. A generous one. A few thousand a month. You can stay here, or we'll find someplace else. Just make this go away. He still thought he could buy me. He still thought this was about a number. I stood up, and for the first time, I felt taller than him. A few thousand a month for my home, for my entire life's savings, for trying to have me declared incompetent. Mom, be reasonable. No, Lucas, I said, and my voice was as flat and cold as a steel tray. You don't understand. This isn't about the money anymore. It's not even about the house. This is about who gets to decide my life. This is about who gets to say whether I am a person or a piece of furniture. And you don't get to make that decision. He flinched. It was a physical reaction, as if I'd slapped him. The arrogance in his eyes finally shattered, replaced by a dawning, hollow understanding. He had lost, and he was just now realizing it. Thomas prepped me for my testimony. They will try to make you angry, Maggie, he warned. They will paint you as bitter, as vengeful. Do not give them that. Do not raise your voice. Your power is not in your anger. It's in your clarity. It's in the fact that you are telling the absolute, heartbreaking truth. That night, the night before the hearing, I sat by the window of my room at Sunrise Palms. I didn't pack. I looked out at the distant lights of Phoenix, a city I had served my entire adult life. They had put me here to be forgotten. They had looked at my wrinkles and my grey hair and written me off. Tomorrow, I whispered to the reflection in the glass. Tomorrow, son, you'll learn that old does not mean stupid. The Maricopa County Superior Courthouse was nothing like television. The room was small, the air was stale, and the chairs were painfully hard. The tension was a thick, heavy blanket, pressing down on all of us. I sat next to Thomas, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. Across the aisle, Lucas and Brittany sat with their lawyer, whispering furiously. Lucas wouldn't look at me. His lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a confused, fragile old woman, a danger to herself. He spoke of my cognitive decline. He presented Lucas's meticulously kept notes as evidence the day I'd supposedly left a pot to burn on the stove, the cardiologist appointment I'd missed, the time I'd misplaced my keys. It was a portrait of senility, carefully crafted from moments of normal human error, twisted into a narrative of incompetence. When it was Thomas's turn, he didn't raise his voice. He simply placed a single, bound report on the judge's desk. Your Honor, he said, we'd like to present the neuropsychological evaluation of Mrs. Doyle, conducted 2 weeks ago by Dr. Eris. And with the court's permission, we have Dr. Eris available via video link. A screen flickered to life, showing the kind, professional woman who had tested me. For 20 minutes, she calmly, clinically, and utterly dismantled their entire case. She stated for the record that I showed 0 signs of cognitive decline. In fact, Your Honor, she said, her voice clear, Mrs. Doyle's memory and critical thinking skills test in the superior range for her age. She is, by any medical standard, exceptionally sharp. Lucas's lawyer sputtered. The judge just raised an eyebrow and motioned for Thomas to continue. We call Ethan Doyle to the stand, Thomas said. My heart broke. Ethan looked so small as he walked to the witness box, his eyes wide with fear. He was sworn in. Thomas spoke to him gently. Ethan, he said, can you tell the court about a time your father made a promise about your grandmother's house? Ethan's voice trembled, but he didn't falter. At Easter, last year, he made a toast, he said, to Mom, and to the house that will always be Grandma's house. And do you remember anything after that? Ethan looked down at his hands. In the car. Mom was mad. She said Dad was too weak with Grandma and that he needed to stick to the plan to get her into assisted living soon. Brittany let out a small, strangled noise. Next, Thomas presented my life, my bank statements, showing every bill paid on time, by me, my calendar, showing my part-time shifts at the clinic, my volunteer work. He showed that I managed my own appointments, my own car, my own life. "This is not about Mrs. Doyle's safety, Your Honor," Thomas said. "This is about her son's desire to take away her authority." Then, he called Kayla Monroe, the forensic accountant. She wasn't emotional at all. She was all numbers. She presented a simple, devastating summary of Lucas's actions since the trust was signed. The line of credit opened, the forged electronic signatures, the high-risk stock purchases. Mr. Doyle had a clear and immediate financial motive for seeking guardianship. "Your Honor," she concluded, "it would give him sole, unquestioned authority to continue liquidating his mother's assets to cover his own financial exposure." The room was silent. Lucas, against his lawyer's frantic advice, demanded to testify. He was trying to repair the damage. He took the stand, all wounded pride, trying to paint himself as the dutiful son, deeply insulted by these false accusations. Thomas's cross-examination was surgical. He didn't ask about greed. He asked about paperwork. "Mr. Doyle, did you sign this credit application on your mother's behalf?" "I was just helping her. She doesn't understand all that online stuff." "So you signed for her?" "It was just for convenience," Lucas said, his voice rising, the victimhood cracking. "She gets so confused with passwords and things. I was just handling it." "So you admit," Thomas said, his voice lethally soft, "to signing her name to legal financial documents without her knowledge." The judge, a stern man in his 50s, held up a hand, silencing Thomas. He looked directly at Lucas, his eyes like chips of ice. "Mr. Doyle," the judge said, his voice cutting through the room, "let me be very clear. Helping someone by handling their finances without their consent is not convenience. Signing another person's name to a loan application, guardian or not, is a very serious matter. It can, and often does, constitute fraud." It was over. I knew it before the judge even spoke again. At the end of the session, the judge's ruling was swift and brutal. "The petition for guardianship is denied, emphatically." He declared me, for the permanent record, to be fully and completely competent to manage my own affairs. Furthermore, he issued an immediate temporary injunction, barring Lucas Doyle from accessing, transferring, or in any way interfering with any account, asset, or property bearing my name, pending the full resolution of the separate civil and criminal financial investigations. We filed out. Lucas was ashen, his face slick with sweat. Brittany was vibrating with rage, her mask of supportive wife gone, leaving only undisguised fury. She was staring at Lucas as if he were a failed investment. I stopped in the hallway, forcing my son to look at me. His eyes were hollow. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at the man my child had become and delivered my own final verdict. "You wanted to be my father, Lucas," I said, my voice low and steady, audible only to him. "But I am still your mother, and I never signed that right over to you." The guardianship hearing was just the preliminary skirmish. The real war, the civil trial, convened 3 weeks later. The atmosphere was different. The air in that courtroom wasn't just tense, it was heavy with the sterile scent of criminal prosecution. The district attorney's office had formally joined its investigation with my civil suit. Lucas and Brittany, sitting at the defendant's table, no longer looked arrogant. They looked small, pale, and terrified. Their lawyer tried to argue the only point he had left. "Mrs. Doyle is an intelligent woman," he insisted. "She signed the documents. No one held a gun to her head. It was a voluntary family arrangement." Thomas Hale stood, and without raising his voice, he performed a complete, methodical autopsy on their case. He laid out the timeline of deception, the calculated manipulation of my trust, the lies about tax protection, and the undue influence that is unique to a relationship of a son to his mother. But the evidence that buried them didn't even come from us. It came from Silverline Wealth Planning. In a desperate attempt to save their own company from charges of conspiracy, they had turned over their entire file. We saw the emails, not just the one I'd photographed, but others. The most damning was from Brittany to their advisor. "We need to finalize the asset transfer before the end of the quarter. Once his mum is settled in the nursing home, we'll be truly free financially." Then, the assistant district attorney stood. He presented the state's preliminary case, felony financial abuse of an elder, multiple counts of wire fraud related to the line of credit, and forgery for the electronic signatures. The room was so quiet I could hear the cheap clock on the wall ticking. In the final, shocking twist, the lawyer for Silverline, to prove their own compliance, presented an audio recording of their initial consultation call with Brittany. Her voice filled the courtroom, bright and chipper. "Look," she'd said. "My mother-in-law doesn't really understand all the complicated details, but she trusts us completely. As long as she signs where we tell her to, we're good to proceed." The judge, a woman who looked like she had seen everything, stared at Brittany over her glasses until my daughter-in-law dissolved. The civil judgment came down first. The judge ruled that the trust was a complex legal entity, but that my home had been moved into it under false pretenses and active deception. She couldn't unravel the whole trust without a longer trial, but she severed the most important part. She issued a summary judgment granting me a life estate for my home. Independent of the trust or my son, it was mine. I could live in it, and it could not be sold, transferred, or used as collateral by anyone else, as long as I lived. Then, she addressed the money. She ordered Lucas and Brittany to be held personally and financially liable for every fraudulent charge, every penny they had siphoned from my credit and equity. The amount, read out loud, made Lucas physically recoil. They were facing immediate, crushing bankruptcy. Finally, the assistant D.A. informed the court that the criminal investigation was active and would be proceeding. Lucas began to tremble, a visible, uncontrollable shaking. Brittany let out a high, thin wail, a sound not of remorse, but of profound, selfish loss. The future she had been optimizing, the Scottsdale house, the influencer lifestyle had just evaporated. I faced them one last time, on the courthouse steps. They looked broken, pathetic. The aura of success they'd worn like armor now stripped away. Lucas looked at me, his eyes pleading, perhaps for the first time in his life. "Mum," he whispered, a croak. I felt no surge of anger, no pity, only a vast, cold quiet. "I have something to say to you both," I said, my voice low and steady. "The lock on my front door is not changing, but my heart is. The Bank of Maggie. The mother you could always run to is closed. We are done. I turned my back on them. Thomas offered me a ride, but I pointed to the curb. Ethan was there, waiting in his 5-year-old sedan. He'd been in the courtroom. He'd heard it all. He didn't speak on the drive home, just kept his eyes on the road. He pulled into my driveway. I got out and stood for a moment, looking at my small brick house. The cacti were dark silhouettes in the late afternoon sun. I put my key in the lock, opened my own door, and stepped inside. The air was cool and still. I walked into the living room and placed my hand, palm flat, against the plaster wall. It was solid. The war had cost me. I had lost my son, or at least the image of the son I believed I had raised. But standing there, in the silence of my home, I knew what I had gained. I had my name back. I had my life back. And I had regained the absolute, final authority to decide how I would live the rest of it. There would be no sequel. There would be no tearful holiday reconciliation. It was simply over. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Please drop a comment below. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and maybe even hit that hype button to help others find this story and feel heard.